Let's talk a little bit about Purdy and Love. Two quarterbacks playing phenomenal this year, especially towards the tail end of the year, the last 10 games for Love in particular. And two guys who took very different paths to get here. Very different paths to get here. Talk to me. We'll go opposite. Talk to me about your thoughts on Brock Purdy as a Green Bay Packer fan. What are you seeing from him? What do you like from him? Do you respect his game? Do you fall into the game manager aspect, or how do you look at Brock Purdy?
I do think there's a level up from the game manager mentality. And I do think that he's bringing different things to the table than some of the other Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks have in the past, specifically a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. I know as a Packer fan, I am certainly far more concerned about what Brock Purdy can do within this offense than I was in the past of what Jimmy Garoppolo could do. And that's saying something because Jimmy Garoppolo beat the Packers on a couple different occasions. So, yeah, I do think that there's a little bit more there. I am interested to see, like, again, with Brock in this offense, we know that he is set up in, again, what's the perfect offense right now in the NFL, what everyone's trying to emulate and copy, and with just superhero playmakers. When you have CMC and Debo and Ayuk and Juszczyk and Kittle and just a plethora of playmakers, the best, arguably the best offensive lineman in football at left tackle, like you're just setting a lot of people up for success. Now, I don't think it's just that. And I think you could make not necessarily the exact same argument, but with Jordan Love, he has a lot of weapons that are performing at a very high level as well. How I define both of these quarterbacks right now is two quarterbacks that have total command of their offense and are doing exactly what their offenses need them to do. Screw the game manager stuff. Both of them have had the ability to make ad-lib plays when they need to. And both of them are playing at a super high level. And up until that Ravens game, I mean, Purdy was in the MVP, legitimate MVP conversation. So listen, he's a super talented dude. They did a phenomenal job unearthing him in the seventh round. And he's been exactly kind of what that offense needed at the exact right time. So yeah, no, I think he's a very talented quarterback. And now, like, the main question for him to answer is, how does he do it in the playoffs? And not just this week, if they win against Green Bay and the following matchups as well. But he's really a great fit for that Shanahan system and just what San Francisco's been doing so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordan Love, I tweeted it out and you could see it. It was evident. I mean, you see the influence from Aaron Rodgers in his game. You see a lot of the same throws where he's off the ground, falling off his back foot. You see that influence, but then, and you also see the influence of he doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way a ton. And I think that's the best asset you can have, especially as a young quarterback, is just protecting the football. And that's what Jordan Love is doing. Brock Purdy, you said it all. I mean, he's having a phenomenal season as well, was in the MVP race. What did Packer fans think of moving on from Aaron Rodgers, especially when Love struggled a little bit early? Do you feel like there was some faith lost in him and he had to kind of regain that? Or do you feel like Packers fans kind of knew it would be a little bit of an up and down first season for him taking over for Aaron Rodgers and were willing to stick with him through that? Like, what was your feelings as he wasn't playing his best football early on?
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of a journey to this. And I think the first thing is, Packer fans have obviously been through this messy divorce in the past with the Favre era. And then you had the previous, couple of years ago where Rodgers demanded a trade out of Green Bay. And then they got things figured out and he stayed. And then there's sort of been each of these years, is he going to retire? Is he going to come back? Is he going to ask for a trade? Is he going to want out? There was thoughts that maybe he was going to get traded to Denver when Nathaniel Hackett went there. That happened the previous year. And then you got to this offseason and it had sort of been known again, he might retire. He might want to go somewhere else. And it definitely was to the point where not all Packer fans, obviously, but it was definitely the majority were, if not ready to move on, were comfortable moving on or like understood the decision to move on. And that certainly got to a much greater level when it was the whole like darkness retreat. And like, I think everyone at that point had like fatigue, not of Rodgers, but of just the entire situation and just being like, listen, the Jordan Love's here. He needs to play. If you retire, if you get traded, like we're just ready. We understand. And then again, not everyone, but definitely I felt like the majority at that time. And then I think Jordan in the first game to come out and have the success against the Chicago Bears, because there was a butt ton of chatter online of Bears Packers in the offseason. And now you don't have Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre, and you guys are going to, now you're going to feel the pain that we felt for all these years. So for Jordan and the team to go out in week one and beat the Bears, and then for the first three quarters, of the Falcons game, dominate until they sort of choked it away, specifically on defense in the fourth quarter. And then to have the comeback that he did against the Saints in week 3, he built up enough in the bank through those first 3 weeks to be like, this isn't great yet, but there's enough here that like, all right, he's legitimately a starting quarterback. Then you had a little bit of a tail off, didn't go great, but there were enough signs still where you're like, he's still a legitimate starter. There's still enough here to be like, all right, we need to see this play out a little bit longer. And then the Steelers game came and it went from like, all right, is he a legitimate starter to like, oh, all right, we've seen this before. He's just going to be another like amazingly great quarterback, and then capped it off this week with his best performance against the season against the Cowboys. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. It's not fair to the rest of the league, but it certainly feels right now like they went back to back with Favre, Rodgers, and Jordan Love.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because Jordan Love, as the season has gone along, you see that improvement. You see him protecting the football. And shout out to Rich Keltz. He talked about the 3 interception game against the Raiders. I know it wasn't that long ago, but it when a quarterback hasn't played and this is his first full season, I mean, that really was kind of light years ago. Quarterbacks get better as they play. They just learn the game. They see coverages. They get more comfortable in the offense. And I think that early on, at least from what I saw from the Packers or remember from the Packers, was they had some injuries at the tackle position. I think that was a little bit troublesome. Aaron Jones was in and out of the lineup, and that caused a lot of issues. Watson's been in and out, and a lot of young receivers all trying to get on the same page. And now everybody, receivers, tight ends, all of them, they're all on the same page. Jones is healthy. The offensive line is clicking. Everything has kind of come together for Love and this Packers team. Doesn't mean that those turnovers still can't show up in this game, but I would tend to believe that Love is more the quarterback we've seen the last 10 weeks than what you saw in the Raiders game or some of these other games potentially.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And just real quick on that, the way that they were set up to start the year, you knew that it was going to take time for this offense to gel because of all, like they didn't have a receiver that had played more than one season. And that was, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobson, to a lesser extent, Samori Toure. All of their other wide receivers were rookies. All of their tight ends were rookies outside of Josiah DeGuara, who's more of a fullback at this point. The plan going into this season was, hey, we still have a really like a returning offensive line led by David Bakhtiari, and we've got Aaron Jones. And while Jordan Love figures it out with all these wide receivers and tight ends that are so young, we can lean on that. And the receiver that we can count on the most is Christian Watson, who showed the most last year. So we've got this receiver we feel good about. We've got Jones, we got Bakhtiari, and immediately Watson doesn't play the first quarter of the season. Jones goes out third quarter of the first game and misses a ton of time and really hasn't been himself up until that Carolina Panthers game 4 weeks ago. They miss a ton of Aaron Jones, and Bakhtiari goes down for the season after week 1. The 3 things that they felt like they could count on going into the year and that they could lean on while everything else figured itself out were all of a sudden gone. And now he had to figure out everything on the fly with all of these young rookie players, a running game that wasn't working. And they did it. And then they finally got Watson back and they got Jones back. And then things just sort of took off from there. But what they had to go through when they lost all those players made them stronger, especially once those players got back. Obviously, Bakhtiari's not back, but I think you get the point from the other two.
Yeah, absolutely. And Strawberry React says, so Love gets a pass, but Brock had a bad game against the Raiders, and he's the worst quarterback ever to play in the NFL. Got it. Do you mean Ravens? Raiders was last year. I assume you mean Ravens, and I don't think you would have got that sense from this channel. Maybe that was other people, but I'll keep it a stack, and I feel like both of them deserve a little bit of grace. Anytime you're within the first 3 years, first 3 years of actually playing, there's so much growth that's going to happen. And some players fall off, start out hot and fall off. Some players don't start out great and they turn out great. And some players are just bad or just good, but you really need time for these players to develop. I think they all deserve that.